welcome to the podcast, Andy Parkinson. Lamparder Digital Solutions, that's right, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's the official company title.
Excellent. So, Andy, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about Lamparder, if that's all right?
Yeah, so I run a company called Lamparder, which is a group holding company for the University of Hull. So what we do is we're there primarily to take intellectual property, knowledge, innovation that comes out of the university and to try and commercialise it, put it into commercial products and services, potentially license it, that technology to other partners. And so our business really is about innovation. It's about working through that process from an idea. We have this thing called technology readiness, so it's about how do you move things through the technology readiness kind of process. And the business has been going for about 4 years. It's now a collection of about 30 different products and services, lots of different sort of business units within it, which is really, really interesting work to do, and never ceases to amaze me how much talent and expertise there just is in a university, and particularly in Hull. It's been a real eye opener for me personally. So that's kind of the company bit. Yep. From my perspective, been in the region for some time, a bit of a passionate advocate for the Humber and for the city, and a variety of roles, done public-private sector, been on executive boards as a director in different guises for different companies. One of the early directors of C40I and building up the tech hub there, and chaired Marketing Humber for 3 years, because I was that. If you want to do something about something, you get on and do it, don't you? So you take those sort of roles. So a very broad past, and what I'm doing at the moment is what I wanted to get back to just doing things I'm really, really passionate and interested about, which is about tech and innovation and that sort of stuff. So that's me.
It sounds challenging, sort of managing, I guess, 30 different products and services. How do you manage that? Because presumably there's quite a breadth of different stuff going on within those businesses.
There is, yeah. So there's a very broad range of things, but what you've got to recognise, they're all at different stages. So some are very, very early stage concepts, might have a small prototype that's being developed. Others are much more mature. We've got some products and services that are very mature and in the market and have been in the market for some time. So it's that kind of classic portfolio management approach that you've got to take, but it's not a science. It's an art, and it's about experience, and it's about intuition, and it's about figuring out how do you really weed out the ones that you don't think are going to get there, and try and do that as fast as you can. How do you try and give as much support to the ones that you think can get there? And you need a lot of insight for this type of company. You've got to go and talk to lots of different people all the time, because you've got to validate your own opinions, and that you can't run a company like this without having quite an extensive network, which is what appealed to me, because I thought, well, I know a lot of people, so that would be quite good. And I've leveraged that network over the last 3 years to help us with some of these things.
Is the group structure then Lamparder? You mentioned Lamparder being a holding company.
Yeah.
So are all the 30 businesses within it, are they their own limited company that have got different ownership structures? Well, you tell me.
Yeah. So at the moment, the company, yes, is a group holding company, but within that, we've got different types of business units. So some are companies. We've got some where we've got equity. Some are just currently in the group company, and they will spin out to a limited company at a particular time. So, for example, this year there'll probably be 4 spin-outs into limited companies that are in the pipeline. So
where the talent, i.e. the uni grad or whatever it is, the talented technology minds that are graduating, they may have some ownership as well, if it's their idea, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we are very flexible and quite bespoke about how we work with. We call them knowledge creators. So a kind of knowledge creator could be an academic, it could be a student or a graduate, as you've described. And we cut a kind of a deal with that individual, but it's done obviously with the benefit. They are the inventors. Yeah. We're simply there to support and to help them be successful. Yeah. So you've got all of our profits are cycled back into the university. The university is a charity.
Yes.
So our goal isn't to have super yachts on the River Humber and everything else. Our goal is to support that individual and make sure they're successful, and that's what I like about this company.
Yeah, I see how, as a graduate, for instance, taking the younger guys, the students or the graduates as an example, you can see how they might have invented something in the bedroom, sort of, to use that cliche, but how the hell do they develop it, take it to market, and all that kind of work, which is where Lamparder can help them.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you like just one really small example, and there's a lot of things going on. But from a student perspective, we've got an enterprise centre on the campus, run by a chap called Mike Thompson, who's a great guy, and he's doing a great job with student enterprise. But this chap came to us and said, I've got this kind of idea. It's a kind of an art trading platform. So what I want to develop is I want to take African art to the Western market. There's some amazing kind of artists across different African countries. I want to bring that to some sort of kind of e-commerce platform. I want to connect art buyers and galleries and those kind of buyers from that perspective onto a platform where they can kind of trade. And then, so that's quite an interesting idea, and it's quite neat. And then you start to chat to the guy, and he's already got artists signed up. So he's already been going across Nigeria and Ghana and other countries, and so he's got his kind of infrastructure of his artists. What he needs is the technical support about building the product and the platform. But then he's got a prototype and he's got a working site, and it's okay, but it's got security issues. So there's things like that you start to see. And for an example like that, we might co-invest with him. We might actually put some developers in to help him get there, and then we might have an option where he can take his shares back or whatever. Whatever works for him. But that just gives you a little flavour.
Yeah, whatever works.
Whatever works, and some of these people you meet, they're quite serious. And one of the other things we see is a lot of the international students are incredibly driven. I mean, we've got another Nigerian enterprise at the moment where 4 guys developing proper professional outfit, and they're just doing it alongside the studies. And it's like, it's impressive. You've got to really know what you're doing, creating a great product. What they need is this other platform is an e-learning platform. They need connections. All they need there is connections. So we can put you with a big international e-learning company you need to speak to. So sometimes it's just about signposting or helping out.
And access to funding as well, probably.
Yes.
Like EU funding, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the funding landscape is always part of this. And one of the great advantages of a university is that a lot of the investment that comes from research grants, so people like UKRI and Innovate UK, these sort of grant providers, they will build out some of this technology as part of that grant. So in the private sector, of course, what you've got to find that cash from the beginning. So through your angel network or through seed capital. And what's great about this type of work with the university is that a lot of sunk capital is kind of already kind of gone through. So you can pick something up quite far down the line, and that's quite attractive then to private investors, because, well, actually, how much does this really need now to get it? And rather than this bottomless pit sometimes that you get into with investments. So.
How do you know which? You said earlier you need to know which ones to back and which ones to kill, or whatever the word was. So how do you know that? What's the process you go through to try and identify that? Yeah,
so it kind of starts with a bunch of meetings and conversations. So we don't have a kind of a written down model. I mean, there is a framework that we work to, but it's more about classic questions like, well, we really need to understand the market, so let's just do some market calculations. So one of the acid tests of most of these ideas is just running a little commercial model around. So the classic total addressable market, service addressable market, and actually doing those calculations. A lot of people talk about it, but do they actually go and demonstrate some numbers? And we do that very early on, because that helps you immediately to size. Actually, this is never going to be exciting enough. From a if you're as an investor, you're only going to be a business that can get to a couple of million. So that's a key part of it, is that kind of commercial modelling. On some we'll do formal market assessments, and we'll sometimes do that ourselves. Sometimes we bring consultants in to go and do some of that exercise. So that market assessment process is pretty key. We assess the technology, we assess the barriers to entry, so a bunch of different metrics that we look at, and that process is a mixture of looking at the individual and is that person going to drive this business? And because it's always about people. You can do as much support in the world, but if the person, the eventer, isn't going to drive it, then you're not going to get anywhere. So part of it is to sense check when you're asking the questions, how quickly they're coming back, what's the quality like of the answers coming back, because if they're serious, they've thought about it. So that within about 6 weeks, you get a view pretty soon of, I'm nervous about this one. Once the nerves kick in, you ask more questions, and then that generally will either come right now, we don't think it's going to go anywhere, or here's a bunch of recommendations that it probably needs. And we had an example of a technology exactly like this, where it was a brilliant invention of measuring the height of waves in the North Sea. So sort of smart wave was the concept. Brilliant academic that created it. So it solves a really cool problem, but is that problem valuable to the market? Everyone goes, oh yeah, that's quite cool, but do you want to pay $100,000 a year for the software? No. So you very quickly get that, and we do that through conversations. We ring Tim Ricks, who's got a shipping business, and say, Tim, can you put us in touch with a guy that understands shipping? And so these very informal conversations very quickly help you identify, have we got nervousness around this, or is this kind of going to go to the next stage? So it's if you saw our model on a bit of paper, it's quite a detailed stage gate type model, but that's not how you build startups. But you just need to check those off as you go through the
commercial sense check
yes.
up front. Yeah, okay. And what percentage of entrepreneurs or startups, whatever you call them, that come to you, do you then say, yeah, we're going to take you further, we're going to bring you under the umbrella? Is it like 1% or is it 50%?
It's much higher, yeah. I mean, I would say at the moment, I would say about 2/3 are active. So 2/3 are active in our portfolio at the moment. They still may not make it, but I would say only about 10% are a kind of no very early on from the beginning.
Right.
We will go. There's always value in something, because you've got to remember, when academics kind of the way they work, they've already convinced a funder, either being Innovate or UKRI, to back a project. So that there's obviously been a reason initially. So there is already some credibility to it. It's I would say less than 10% of the ones very early we say, no, that's just not going to go anywhere. But the rest, we take into the portfolio and we go through that process.
And what, I guess you work with both startups but some of those progress to become scale-ups as well.
Yes.
What are the biggest challenge that you see? Let's start with startups. What are the biggest challenges that you see with those kind of type of organisations?
I think startup. There's all the classic challenges with startups, like the right people and all of those commercial sort of sensitivities. But it does boil down to money. It's cash, and in this part of the world, in the Humber, and I've always sort of said this publicly as well, we don't have a finance network here, that you would have in Leeds or you'd have in Manchester or in London particularly. So that access to kind of angel funding, seed capital, is not easy to find. There are networks here, but they're small, and it's quite hard to build a startup in this part of the world, actually. Although we've got great digital assets like great connectivity, and we've got great tech hubs like obviously C40i and others. So, but it's the cash, it's the access to the cash, and we see that when you're trying to move a product through that process, you've got to have some money to pay for some development of that, and that is the hardest thing. I spend most of my days really just trying to figure out, how do I get an extra 10 grand put over there so I can move that bit on, and I just need a prototype. So you're constantly kind of spread betting, validating, and it's a slow process. Some of the sales cycles for us for a new concept could be 3 years before it gets anywhere near generating money.
Do you ever find that within the 30, or because there are 30 or so businesses or ideas that you're working with, that you're spreading yourself too thinly? And if you're investing even £1 in one that may not have the greatest chances of success, it's £1 taken away from one that might be more, better prospects.
Yeah, we encounter that all the time, and I used to work with a chap called Gary Young, who was the MD of KCOM. I don't know if you've ever come across Gary, but he's moved down south now. But Gary had this mantra for his directors, which is it's focus. You can't spread yourself too. All that was really good sort of advice, but we are literally doing the opposite. So everything, all your intuition says, all your kind of training says is you've got to focus the business, but we are having to do the opposite and try and make it work. So
why are you having to do it?
Because there's so much opportunity, and part of our problem, I would say problem, part of our challenge is that we are providing a service to the university. So we can't just say, oh, actually we've decided we're not going to talk to you tomorrow, because that's the business we're in. So we're obliged to try and work with that innovation. What will happen over time is our assessments get tighter and more stringent and event. But it's a complex world, academia. You don't want to discourage academics from wanting to commercialise, because they do all this effort in terms of research. They spend years becoming experts in areas. You don't want to discourage them from then commercialising that, because if you look at where government are at the moment, there's a huge government drive. Both manifestos of both main parties. R&D investment as a percentage of GDP. It's currently, the latest numbers, 1.9% in the UK, or something like that. Target's been 2.4% forever. And you look at, France 3%, US 4%, Israel 5%, Japan 5%. So government are so desperate to try and solve, how do we get more R&D investment in the economy? Now, industry's part of that, and academia is part of that. So this interface between kind of academia and research as an industry needs to get closer and tighter, and the tighter that becomes, the more R&D investment flows into the economy, because you need their research to get into the market. You need them to be solving problems. So it's really important that we don't discourage academics from wanting to commercialise, because we want to make that easy and slick. So I've gone into a bit of detail there around why it's a challenge, because
I can understand.
Because we want them to always come. We always want them to knock on the door and say we've got something.
But if it was an outright commercial entity without those restrictions or shackles, what you might call them, from an academic point of view, and I realise the benefits of promoting the academic side, but without those, if you had all your time and attention on 2 or 3 gems within the portfolio of 30, those 2 or 3 might be infinitely more successful. But I realise that's not your model. It can't be, because of the universities.
Yeah. But here's the trick. So here's the trick, and we're not at that level of maturity yet as a business. If you look at what other people are doing in our sector, some other universities, Nottingham, Sheffield, they've been doing this for 20 years. Hull started out on this journey 4 years ago. So we haven't got to that point that you're describing now. My answer to that would be, well, you can't hang on to stuff.
No,
we won't scale them up. Right, somebody else has got to do that. So you've got to find the partners. This is where you really move into either finding investors that what I call smart investments, so people are going to bring knowledge to that business, not dumb investment where it's just cash. So we would need smart investors, and you'd need the right scale partners that can do it. I don't think it works. And you look around the country, different UK spin out models. That is how it's done. We haven't got a business yet to a point where we're getting to that stage. We've got a few good candidates, but
what are the kind of key indicators that you think actually we're at a point now where we need to shake hands and wish them on their merry way and move them over to the private sector? Is it a size? Is it something to make profit? What does that look like?
It's generally around profit. It's generally around, can they cover the costs? That's the big tick. But sometimes we'll take a risk, and we have a business that's in incubation at the moment, which is that basically works out how you move freight trains around the country. So it's called NR+. And with that business, we really could see the benefit of it. So we took the costs into our business very quickly. So we took costs out of the university, put them into Lampada, and that's made a loss for the first 2 years, and that's been on the balance sheet. So that is simply because we believed in it, and 2 weeks ago we won a huge tender, which has been fantastic. So that business is going to fly now. But generally, as a rule, I like to see that there's enough demand to cover cost, and at that point we can take it out, unless it's a real superstar side business that we think we can do something with.
Have you had any yet that you have sold off or sold your stake and they've gone independent, or sold to smart investors?
So not yet. So we've got one that is going through an exit, but it's a managed exit. So it's basically about extracting as much value out of it as we can before we kind of sell it or get rid of it. So, but not yet. So I said we're early stage.
How will you find a buyer for that particular one?
It's going to the market. So that particular business is in a very defined sector. So there's a whole bunch of competitors that are probably interested in it because of the customer base and things like that. Other than that, back to the challenge about how do you access finance people in this part of the world. It's difficult. So I mean, I have a little network of people that have investors, but I think everyone is wanting the same kind of people, isn't it? I think we're all looking for that. So that remains the speed limit, I think,
Yeah.
On how you really take this through. We're lucky again in the university that we can tap into very small internal grants to do prototyping stuff. So that there's a fund which every university gets allocated called the Higher Education Innovation Fund, and it's designed specifically for that. Just de-risk, have a go at doing something. Will it work? But it's not huge amounts of money, So that's been invaluable to our business because we've been able to tap into even small pots of £10,000-15,000 just to move a prototype on, so you can get a business development meeting with someone and you've got a working prototype. Things like that are really, really powerful. So
is this a model that you could take just in the private sector, so not related to university, not related to academia, just an investment group that brings a portfolio of startups together and takes a share of that and helps them develop? Does that exist, I guess, in the private sector?
Absolutely exists, and the guys at C40I, very much doing something similar to that, with good success. Their model is interesting because they provide that type of support that I'm describing as well, and again, there's probably some sort of equity discussion between the parties, but they're also about providing the kind of the workplace and the activity for it all to happen. So creating that tech campus and that community of talent, and so absolutely. And there's lots of examples out there of kind of in big investment funds tapping into these types of sort of innovation networks and things like that. If you're an investment fund and you're an investor, you're constantly looking for an advantage. One of our investors into one of the businesses said something quite insightful when he said, I'm really keen to kind of work with you guys because I've lost out on 4 investments through bigger investors. So even within the investment market, they're getting top trumped. So they're always looking for, is there a place in the country where there's not a lot of investors that we can tap into the ideas? And so that's actually regionally, that should be something we should be trying to kind of tap into a little bit. There's all this untapped talent here, and again, the guys at C40I have done a lot of this. They've brought investors to C40I to sort of showcase off, and I think that's been reasonably successful. There's businesses there that have taken money in, and that's been great. We need more of it.
It must be considered pretty high risk though for an investor. If an investor can go and stick it in just a normal account now and get a reasonable return, or the stock market and get 7-8% over a long term, what are they looking to get? Really high returns from an investment in that sort of organisation, because there's a level of risk that comes with it as well.
So yes is the answer to that. It's risk reward, isn't it, the classic stuff. So what you tend to get with business startups in this region is if because you don't have a lot of leverage, unless your technology is really fantastic and you've got all those kind of key things in place like patents and everything else, you will be losing a lot of equity. They will be demanding a lot of equity, and it's not uncommon for them to want 50% of a business for what will really be quite a small, modest investment. We have an investment going where we have a head of terms agreed on another business with an investor, and their starting point for what they wanted, for the amount of money they're putting in, and you think, and I'm literally like, say, but when I was a junior manager in a local authority, I had authority to sign off more than money for this budget. So I can't believe a company your size. And then we had to go and meet the shareholding bank that owned this company in London. So we went and met this guy, sharp suit, these, absolutely pristinely turned out, and his little Aston Martin pocketbook and all the rest of it. And we go and have this meeting, and I'm like, for what was probably 200 grand or something, I'm like, I just can't believe I'm sat here. I can't believe in an organisation your size that you're that bothered about a 200 grand investment. And I remember when I did some work with Dave Kilburn at MKM, and I'm sure he won't mind me talking about this, but Bain Capital at the time, obviously still at MKM, when you're talking about some of the sums of investment and £1 million investment into some sort of e-commerce platform or something, and I remember the guy from Bain saying to me, he said, my people will look at that number for about 3 seconds and turn over the page. And obviously for David, quite right, it's a lot of money, isn't it? £1 million, and I think that always stuck with me. And so you get all these different disparities in investors about what they want and what their view is, and it's ultimately about the size of the fund. If Bain are a $90 billion asset company, so
just
they're
a
not
few more
bothered about
zeros.
£1 million. Whereas if you're working with an angel network where 10 grand to an angel investor is a lot of money, they're going to want everything because they've got more to lose, right? So,
of course.
and that's what we suffer with in this region to some extent. We've got wealthy people, but when you go to other parts of the country, the world, it's there are huge pots of money out there.
And how do the entrepreneurs, if you like, feel about they've slaved away in their bedroom for 3 years building something until the early hours of the morning, and then suddenly someone says, "Yeah, I'll give you 10 grand, but I want 50% of everything you've done over the last 3 years." How does that conversation go?
It can be really mixed. I mean, in academia, it's not so bad. Academics are rarely motivated by being millionaires, right? They're just motivated by, I want my thing to be out there and see that people have I invented that. Yeah. Entrepreneurs may be slightly different, and it depends on how desperate they kind of are to get that product to market. Now, we've all seen Dragon's Den, so you've seen those stage negotiations, haven't you? And you see the different sort of almost different types of entrepreneurs. Those that just want to, I'll just sign, I don't care what you offer me, I'm signing, versus those that are clearly like deluded.
And
you're just like,
I would say you want 100% of bugger all, or you can have 50% or 80% of something with the chance to go with one of these.
And they won't be successful, will they? You go about 3 years, they won't have been successful. Yeah. So it's a mixed bag. I think to build a business as an entrepreneur, you need to be so focused and bought into your product, because that's the only way you're going to motivate yourself every day, isn't it? But of course, that probably clouds your judgment when you're into some of these deals, and I've certainly seen that for my small part in this arena, is that you almost need somebody else with you, just giving you that kind of actual sense check that I hear what you're saying, that you think your product's the best thing ever, but actually I'd be taking this deal. Or actually the opposite, or these guys are just going to absolutely give you, they're just trying to take far too much for what you've got. So it's a difficult thing.
Is that your job? Is that what you do? You're the voice on the shoulder saying, really, you should be taking this, or...
Yeah, I mean, I've played that role in the past for some businesses. So I mean, I've helped through the C40I days, and some of the businesses there have helped some of those. I think in my world now, I'm part of the negotiation process of trying to do that. With academia, it's fairly straightforward. But we've got other investments at the moment where we are in commercial negotiations, and I mean, that process always fascinates me. I mean, I love how a commercial deal is struck, because the amount of theatre that goes in, and I'm quite interested in psychology in general, but it's such obvious psychology what's unfolding in front of you, and you're like,
I ain't got time for it.
Just like, for Christ's sake, so obvious. So there's a chap actually at C40I who was a great guy, and if people listening, you should check this guy out. It's a guy called Bob Spence, and he does negotiation training. And the great thing about negotiation training is nobody else does negotiation training.
That's a great point, yeah.
So if you do your training right, you're in a great position. And that was, when I worked at Spencer Group with Charlie, that's such a commercially aggressive industry. I mean, and certainly not my part. Some of the other directors, what they were involved in, you're dealing with regulated clients, they're so contractually aggressive. So you're constantly negotiating. Yeah. I said to Charlie, we should just get everyone negotiation training, right? And Bob came in, it was brilliant. But after you do that, you see, you can't. It's like the Matrix. All of a sudden, you just see the kind of what's happening in front of you, and I can clearly see what's happening.
It's the same with being sold to, because we've had sales training here, and we do a lot of sales training for our teams. Next time I'm in buying a car or buying whatever, they're trying to do it back to me. I know what you're doing. Stop wasting my time.
Exactly.
You do see it.
You do see it, don't you? And I mean, but the theatre of it is quite interesting. So it's all about playing people in position at the right time in the point of the process you're in, and escalation paths, and taking the heat out of it, and actually, we have to come back to you on that point. I will have to go check with the CA on that one. So it's all theatre.
Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, I'm in the same place as you know. I mean, and I go into discussion. Are we going to do this? Which way are we doing this? Are we going to play the game and all dance around, or are we just going to have an honest conversation and get a deal done? Yeah. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
And we found it with acquisitions. We made a few acquisitions in the last few years, and more recently, when we got into heads of terms with a target, it was just dead straightforward. Me and the other guy were both of the same sort of mindset, and we're thinking, where do we need to be to get this done? Well, that's a bit high, or it's a bit low, right? Let's just do that. Call it that. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And the negotiation lasts 15 minutes or less.
That's rare though, isn't it? Isn't
Maybe.
it?
I don't know.
Most people, there is the theatre. I mean, we see it every week. You know, we deal with clients all day,
Yeah,
every day.
yeah,
There's
from a customer's perspective.
small and big
that's-
negotiations.
Yeah. With the smart investor sort of identity, can a smart investor be a business? So Spectrum, for instance. So I know you don't know a huge amount about us yet, but in the sense that we're a business that are acquisitive and be looking for the next digital opportunity that will form part of Spectrum Digital's portfolio. It's not beyond the realms and possibility that we find a graduate or maybe more likely a graduate that's got a startup that is over the road at Lampada, and we think that there's a place for that in our portfolio. But what that guy lacks is the sales engine and the infrastructure and all the stuff that we have as an established business. I can see a way where that might form part of what we do. Is that something that you would look at, do you think?
100%. I mean, businesses should be investors. There's a whole bunch, I mean, you can read extensively in academic literature about why businesses should be more entrepreneurial, how their own investments in R&D will drive the economy, all that stuff. And there's Gartner, there's PwC studies on businesses that do that are in the top 25% growth quartiles all the time. And so it's, 100%. And I think those are the type, when I was describing partnerships, they're the types of partnerships that work. You know, we've got something over here, we accept it needs something else, and if you've got another partner that can bring that, it doesn't have to be an investor per se, it can be a business, it can be an organisation. And one of the investors we've got in our freight software is exactly that. They're a company that are operating in that market. They're not an investor.
They might want to enhance their service or diversify ever so slightly and broaden their portfolio. And
that's exactly it. They see this product, transforming what they do operationally, but then they think, well, the upside then is if it commercializes as well, we've got stakes. So definitely.
Is it just technology businesses that you invest in? Is it? No.
It can be anything.
Okay.
So, I mean, one of our most successful businesses at the moment is a business called the Centre for Human Factors. So this is an occupational psychology consultancy. Professor Fiona Earle, who's just an expert in understanding well-being and stress risk. So, why does workplace stress happen? How does it contribute to poor mental health? All of that stuff. And she's got quite unique tools and techniques that she deploys, and she's got new innovative ways about how you research that. And that business up to this point doesn't really touch technology. And it's only 18 months old, and it's turned over nearly £1 million in 18 months.
Did they sell the consultancy time or something?
Yeah, so they sell projects, so that they go in and will say, right, there's kind of 3 steps for them. First step is we identify occupational stress risk. So take your organisation, they would come in and say, right, we're going to work out what is driving stress in your organisation. So that's kind of the first step. They then obviously give you advice and expertise and interventions about how you can stop that. So how do you move from tertiary interventions to preventionary type interventions, and they help you with that. And then where that business is at now and its growth is, project to project revenue is quite difficult when you're trying to scale a consultancy business. So we need to productize it, and that's actually where the technology is now going to come into that business, because we've built a platform, a digital platform, that's going to allow managers to have it guides a manager through a conversation with an employee around how to manage those risks. Nobody's trained in that. I mean, you get mental health first aider type training, but that's not really what this is, like that on steroids. How do you have that type of risk-based conversation? So that's an example of a business that wasn't a technology business, but is probably going to become one. And local government at the moment is where the market is for that, because you've got social care services with the stress risk. Number of people with sickness absence for stress is through the roof in local government and in the health service. So they're clamouring for what is out there, and this is not about, there's a whole bunch of occupational health type businesses that will do the well-being stuff, and this is much more the scientific bit around how you actually identify, remove it, and in theory you should come out with much better, healthier, mentally healthier people. And the numbers around it are crazy. Like in local government, I think Deloitte have done a study that says, government commissioned them, it's about £2,000 a head is the cost of stress for per employee. So you've got kind of 2 issues. You've got sickness absence, so I'm physically not at work, and then you've got presenteeism, where you're at work and you shouldn't be at work, and you're just not productive. So this in local government, to give you the size of the problem, we think somewhere between 10 to 20% of local authority workers are suffering severe mental health problems at the moment, and their sickness rates are huge. You quantify that up, and it's about 300-400 million quid as a cost every year. So this product aims to kind of reduce that, but it's an example of something that just came out of occupational psychology, and is now turning into a bit of a technology business. Okay. But it's very, very broad. Whatever an academic is working on could potentially come our way. So I mean, it could be anything.
Are there certain areas that you kind of look for? So I mean, there's buzzwords. There's AI that's everywhere at the minute. You're looking for AI businesses within the university, or is it just whatever kind of stumbles across you?
I think we're trying to follow trends. So a lot of our work is, we were talking earlier about going out and talking to people and network and things like that. So we're constantly monitoring what businesses want, what are the challenges they've got, what are they talking about. So businesses are constantly talking about climate change, net zero. We really should be doing more on that. How do we do it? So that's a constant theme. Data, big data, still remains. Whatever the hell that means, nowadays, big data. But it's still about how do we get value out of our data. That remains a thing. That's morphed into the AI discussion now. Efficiency, cost control, productivity, and actually, while we go and talk to a business about net zero, what we're really talking about is efficiency. It's not about climate. It's about your operation. It's about resource utilisation. So we tend to follow the themes, and so we take that demand into the university. What we do is we go looking for, who have we got? What bodies of research have we got that might solve that problem? So we kind of play this matchmaking service, and that's been quite successful in the last 2 or 3 years. And we can find, and I can guarantee there'll be somebody in that university that can solve pretty much any challenge. You've just got to go find them, and there they are, beavering away, doing outstanding work, and they're just publishing. And yet this business over here has got it. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. So that's the kind of sweet spot.
Interesting. So if we as a business had we want some innovation within a certain area, a certain product set, then we could come to you and say, actually, we see a big opportunity in this area. Have you got somebody in the university that's doing some research in that space that you could connect us up with? That's
exactly it. Yeah. And if it morphs into something, it morphs into it. So when I was at KCOM as a director at KCOM, we were having a real big problem with wireless connectivity. So it's all changed now. I mean, this is probably about 7 or 8 years ago. But when fibre was really being rolled out, everyone was ringing the internet service provider. The internet doesn't work. So they go on the website, they go on their checker tool, and so it's a network monitoring tool. So they go on and go, it is working. What they meant was the Wi-Fi is not working. Right. So you've got Wi-Fi technology has increased significantly, but when I was running customer experience stuff at KCOM, it was driving me insane. It was like 24,000 calls a month coming in. People saying, my fish tank didn't connect to the internet, or whatever it was, because everything's with IoT, everything's going to the internet. So how do you solve this? So we went to the university and said, actually, have you got any expertise around telecoms? We need people and expertise that really understand how you can spot problems with Wi-Fi connectivity. And lo and behold, there's a professor sat there that's their life's work. So we worked on some prototypes with them at the time, and where we were trying to get to was proactive sort of responsive monitoring. So essentially putting a device in a house that constantly scans for interference problems and then notifies you as the business, and then you automatically test the customer to say, we're fully aware that there's a problem, and actually we're gonna do this or we're gonna do that. Because back in 8 years ago, people didn't realise you put a baby monitor on in your house, you'll knock out 70% of the speed of your Wi-Fi.
Right.
And then you put your microwave on at the same time, and if you've got a cheap power pack from China, that's it. It kills it, and then it can. If obviously the connection drops to a point, it then drops the connection completely, and then you've got to reconnect. And the internet doesn't work. So you're in KCOM, 24,000 calls a month. So those examples is where university is really useful, because we got a load of insight. We had engineers, we had like 100 people that specialise in this. You go and speak to some people in university, it's like we learned some stuff.
Interesting. So you're obviously passionate about this region, Humber Region. What do you think the future is for for this region over the next 10 years? Because I know kind of renewables was the big focus a few years ago. We were going to be the winner in terms of the renewable sector. Is that still the case, or do you think there's a different direction for us?
It's still the case. There's still the big game in town for the region is to capitalise on renewable green investment, technology, etc. I have a nervousness about it. I think a lot of the new net zero kind of industries that will come up, the volume of jobs, I'm not sure are quite maybe what we think they are. I'll say it sort of sensitive as I can, but the hydrogen economy, which hydrogen is being talked about and has been for many years. A hydrogen storage facility is quite a small number of people running that facility. It's not a large number of people, right? So, and we've got a huge employment structure in this region at the moment of people employed in high carbon industries. So we're going to have this transition, and you look at the age profile of the people in those high carbon industries. There's a huge gulf coming, where who's going to work in these high skilled jobs? Because at the moment, what we've got in the region, we've still got deprivation. We've still got low skilled kind of people on level 2, level 3. If you're Siemens, you're in a global skills market, right? They've done a wonderful job locally, but they're a business, and they'll get the best people in the world to come and work for them. So I've got a concern about the economics around some of that, and I'm not an economist, but just when you look at the numbers at a macro level, you think, how does that work? So, but it's still going to be the game in town for the region. My biggest issue at the moment, and this is what I'm probably going to start banging the drum a lot more on, is we have an economy at the moment around economic development plans and everything else. I don't see emerging technology driving that economy. So the big gaps for me at the moment for us is things like, well, what does AI mean for economies in general, and what is our plan as the region? Do we have any actual natural assets that would allow us to compete more in that space? And so I feel at the moment we're missing the technology-led element of our economic development approach at the moment as a region.
I was going to say as a region, not as a UK, or probably both.
Yeah, I think region. Well, maybe a bit of both, but yeah. We've always had an amazing opportunity in this region around digital and tech, and we've never really capitalised on it properly. A whole bunch of reasons for that we probably shouldn't go into, but that still remains the opportunity. And if I look at economic development strategies now across the region, it's not technology led. It's classic stuff, right? So that's the big leap we've got to make. And I actually think businesses like yourselves, we need a group of people that we need business to help with this and to lead this agenda, because we can't just keep saying local authorities need to do it, councils should do it. It's not really they do the best, right, with what they've got. They need businesses to say, this is how we want the economy to look, and we need help in these areas. And so that's the big debate, I think, coming over the hill for us in the region, is when you look at AI and you look at all these emerging technologies that are going to hit us, what's our strategy for that? What is our economic strategy? How are we going to leverage all that stuff? And it might be that we don't have the natural assets, so think of something else then. So you move on. So that process, I'm really keen to engage in discussions with other tech-focused businesses on that. Particularly businesses like you guys, who are you're growing. You're a stable business. You're in that bracket where you're not a small company. So you guys are a great example of the type of business, I think, that should be going, right, what do we want?
Yeah.
We're a company that are trading in this part of the world, but what do we want around us? Yeah. From a tech perspective.
We're keen to be part of that conversation. I think someone's got to grasp the nettle and take lead on defining that strategy.
And then people like the university, the vice chancellor, a great guy, Dave Pettler's come from Sheffield. Then you can get those kind of anchor institutions working with you, But I think it's got to be business led. I think the councils do a great job with the resources they've got. I mean, they've been decimated, by the way, from a budgetary perspective. And there's some great people in the local authorities, but business needs to step up for me. I think we need to step up and lead it.
Yeah.
And so that regionally, I think that's where we need to get to. I still worry about the skills issue in this part of the world. I still think it's not an easy challenge to fix, but if you look at the new jobs in renewables I'm talking very broad terms here, but if you look at those sort of jobs, they are higher value jobs, significantly higher value. So to get those higher value jobs, you need those qualifications. So we're going to have a bunch of people still in parts of East Riding and Goole and potentially in certainly in Hull, where how do you mobilise that group of people, because that's where the volume is, and we've got enough people to fill those jobs, but we haven't got the skills. So it's that conundrum for me that I'm personally fascinated about. It's about aspiration. How do you raise aspiration of people in some of these parts, and how do you inspire people? And that is what will make a huge difference to our economy. If we can get more of these jobs landed locally, and we can protect the those kind of high carbon sector jobs, and we can manage that transition properly. I still and always will say this is a great part of the world to do business. I think it's got great land prices. It's a good place to live. It's got good facilities and services. It's got great transport infrastructure. People used to wind me when I was down in working with Whitehall in London, and comments like Hull's in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, no, it isn't at all. It's right in the middle of the country. It's easy to get to, and I can get to if I get a ferry to Europe, right? I can access more households within a 2-hour drive time from Rotterdam than I can from Hull in the UK. So I have the same size market on my doorstep for the whole of the UK than I do from Hull. So it's just about thinking differently about it, and so I think we've got loads going for us in this region. We struggle with the obvious problem, which is that the kind of political dilemma around devolution. That's where our handbrake is at the moment. Is that without that devolved kind of mayoral authority, government's kind of rules that they've set at the moment is that that's how you get larger amounts of investment. That's how you get. Now, that's a challenge, because politically it's a challenge, and I'm not a politician. I'm sure you should, like Ross, and you should get Anne from East Riding on there, could come and talk about it. But I actually take a bit of a different view on some of that stuff now. I think yes, it'd be great if you had it, but don't kind of wait.
Don't rely on it.
Just don't wait. Just do something else. We're good enough and clever enough in this region to come up with something else.
It's a great point on the number of bodies. Actually, we used to work for a provider of protective equipment in the region, and I was asked at Arco. So I was asked, we did a lot of work with oil and gas, offshore oil and gas at the time, and my job was kind of market analyst. So I was told, don't worry, because offshore wind is coming. So let's have a look at the offshore wind market and just kind of scope the size of that market versus oil and gas. Big challenge is that loads of people get sent onto an oil and gas platform, and you need lots of high vis and helmets. With offshore wind, the idea is you don't send anybody out there ever. Right. And there's just no bodies. And it's a great point, kind of getting people thinking about that. It's maintenance. It's technology driven maintenance, isn't it? So it's light touch, it's automation, it's all that good stuff, which is what we want for productivity. The jobs. So we've. I still think we've done a remarkable turnaround in the Humber from where we were. And if you read some of the history books, and we suffered years of industrial decline here. And I worked for the local authority for about 7 years, one of my sort of first early jobs. And when I look back to what was the state of what was going on then regionally, it was bad. This was not a great place. It's unrecognisable from that perspective. So I think we punch above our weight. I think we're guilty. I still think we're guilty in this region of. We've got so frustrated with it and the relationship with government that we just now demand, well, you should just give us things. And I still think we're guilty of not properly defining what it is we want. And, well, what projects are we really trying to mobilise at a sort of a kind of macro regional level? I still don't think we've got that right. There's some things that are going on. But, government, as in our investors as well, we've talked about they are investors, and you work with Whitehall sort of officers in the civil service. All they're bothered about is a return. So if I put a pound in Manchester, I'll probably get £10 back. If I put a pound in Hull, will I get £10? Probably not. So these are the metrics that you need ambitious projects then to demonstrate those types of returns, and then you do get an interesting conversation, parking all the political side of it. But I still think I'd like to see the region do more on ambition and really stretching the thinking. And when Tim Ricks, who sort of came up with the lagoon idea and things like that, and again, park all the sort of fors and againsts for it, but I just loved it because it's just a great
big ambitious idea, isn't it?
Different, isn't it?
Somebody
Yeah.
just decided, you know
Yeah.
what, I'm going to have a go at something. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I just wish we had 10 of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, and last question. So the podcast is called Tomorrow's Workplace Today. So if you could cast your mind forward 10 years in terms of a workplace, what do you think the big differences would be versus today?
Ooh, 10 years, right. So I'd be amazed if in 10 years we've not got a lot of digital integrated tools that are helping us do our day job. So ChatGPT is an obvious answer to that. But I think you're going to see an explosion of different applications that use the principles of large language models and things like that. I think whilst I've cooled on my excitement around some of that stuff, I still think that the breakthrough technology around kind of large language models is there now, and I can't see that not progressing into a whole bunch of applications that help you in your day job.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to almost have a digital, everyone will almost have a digital personal assistant. I can kind of see that starting to emerge. And so when we talk about digital twins, which is a kind of thing obviously in tech, isn't it, about digital twin thing, I almost think you might have a digital work twin.
Yeah.
So, right, I need to do this task. I'm going to ask my digital work twin to do it for me, or how do I do this? And think about technologies even in manufacturing, like augmented reality technologies. All this stuff is kind of there, not massively embedded yet, but that's where we're heading, isn't it? Is right, I need to change a part on a machine. Well, I'm just going to flip the app up and it's going to walk me through it step by step to do it. So I think that digital, I'm trying to think of a good word for it, digital assistance, I think will go through the roof. And I think in 10 years, most workplaces, most people will have a huge digital assistant type resource that they're tapping into. Other than that, I think it will be fairly, hopefully.
That's what we sell.
Yeah, well, there you go then. That's, you're in the good place for it. Other than that, I think it will. I don't think there'll be mass changes in that. I think just technology is going to shift. Our habits of work, I think, will be reasonably similar.
Yeah.
We're in a weird place, aren't we? Because the pandemic and everyone was, nobody's going to work in an office again, and I was like, of course they are. But I think, it became more acceptable than ever to have remote working. I think that's what the pandemic did do.
Yeah.
There's now rushes back to the office, but I still think, hybrid working, yes. More digital technology helping you, yes. I think there'll be a huge push around mental well-being. So I think that will be very different in 10 years. I mean, I know from our relationship with HSE that there's going to be legislation like there is in physical health and safety. That's going to eventually come for mental safety. So the way you manage as a company your employees is going to change. So that's going to disrupt HR hugely. So I think there'll be things like that that'll be very different. I think as workers, will be incredibly looked after because they'll mandate it. But other than that, I think we'll still be coming in and out of work. I think we'll still be doing stuff like this.
Good stuff.
Good answer.
Andy, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
It's been really good to have you.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.